Welcome back to Biology 142. In this unit, we're going to cover the reproductive system. So we're going to go over both the male and female reproductive system. First, we're going to cover the male reproductive system. So an overview, male and female reproductive systems are going to be a series of glands and tubes that produce and nurture sex cells. And after they produce these and nurture them, they're also going to have to transport them to the site of fertilization. Now with the male reproductive system, the job is going to be to produce and sustain functional sperm, and then it has to transport that sperm to the outside of the body. Now looking at this picture here, see if we can get a highlighter up, that yellow. Alright, first thing we're going to look at is going to be the scrotum here. Now, with the scrotum, it's going to be a sac-like structure that's going to hold the testes outside of the body. Testes, or testis, is going to be one. Testes is going to be plural. So depending on if you're talking about one or if you're talking about more than one, that's going to be the difference. Testis is T-E-S-T-I-S, and then testes is E-S instead. All right. So with this, there's also going to be muscles that are going to surround the skin sac. Those muscles are going to be very important because they're going to help to support the scrotum, and also they're going to help to control the temperature of the scrotum, and that's going to have to deal with the production of sperm. So the job there is to help to protect the testes inside of the scrotum, and like we said, control that temperature, which helps to produce sperm. The testes inside of the scrotum are going to be basically two oval-shaped glands that are going to produce and they're going to store the sperm. So that's going to be these structures here that you see. Those, you only see one from the side, that is a testis. They're also going to help to produce and secrete hormones such as testosterone. Inside of each testicle, we're going to look at it closer, you're going to have a series of small tubes with cells inside there called spermatogonial stem cells, or the spermatogonia. These are going to be responsible for producing the sperm. So the spermatogonia then are going to move from these tubes to the epididymis. And so you see the epididymis here. That's going to be the structure that sits up top. So the epididymis is going to be located at the top of each testicle, and it's basically going to be a tightly coiled tube that's going to store sperm while they mature. So the sperm is going to be made in the testis and then goes to the epididymis to mature. Also, the epididymis is going to absorb any excess fluid that's released by the testicles, and is actually going to use this to help move the sperm through the reproductive tract. Next, we're going up and we will see the vas deferens. So this here, you're going to see the vas deferens. That's going to be a tube that's going to lead from the epididymis to the urethra. So with the vas deferens, it is going to move that matured sperm once it's ready to mature and be ejaculated. It moves it into basically what we call the ejaculatory ducts and then through the urethra before ejaculation. Now, the vas deferens will be found in what's called the spermatic cord, and that spermatic cord not only holds the vas deferens, but it's also going to contain things such as nerves, blood vessels, and even lymph vessels. Now on the outside portion, we did talk about these muscles. We'll talk about a little bit more in some of the next picture that's going to surround that scrotum. One of those important ones is going to be the cremaster muscle that's going to surround it. It's going to help to move the testicles and the spermatic cord closer to the body if it's cooler, or it releases, and if the body's hot, it allows the testicles to hang lower. That's going to be necessary, and we're going to talk about that later for sperm production. Now coming up, we have what's called the, as it comes, let's see, comes up through. First we're going to hit that ejaculatory duct, which is going to add in some fluids through here. Then we're going to go to the seminal vesicle. That adds fluids. Let me see on here. So up here you're going to have that seminal vesicle. That's what's going to come in and add more fluids to this area here. As it goes then through the ejaculatory duct, it's going to go through the prostate gland. That's going to add more fluid. And so we see that prostate gland here. And then you're going to have your bulbourethral gland. That's going to be the next gland that comes through. That's going to be important because it's going to add mucus, and that's going to lubricate the tip of the penis to reduce friction during intercourse, as well as adding fluid into the semen. Now if you come on down, it's going to enter into the urethra, and then that urethra through here is going to help to exit the penis. Now the penis is going to be a cylindrical organ that fills with blood and becomes erect. And this is going to make this organ functional to deliver the sperm. Now the tissue that's going to be found in the penis is going to be called the corpus cavernosum and the corpus spongiosum. And basically this is going to be kind of like hollow open space connective tissue that is going to fill with blood, and as it fills with blood it does cause the organ to become erect. Next we head down to the tip of the penis, which is referred to as the glans penis, and that sometimes will be covered with a foreskin. It depends on if the male has been circumcised or if they haven't. So if they have not been circumcised, you will have the skin that comes over top of it, which is going to be the foreskin. Now there are some other things here that are going to be part of other systems. For example, you see the ureter, which is, if you remember back from the last unit, is going to take urine from the bladder down to the urethra and exit through the body. Of course, you see portions of the large intestine there as it's going to exit the body through the anus, and that's how the fecal matter comes out. You see that urinary bladder up top. So that ureter, remember, is taking the urine from the kidneys to the bladder, and then it exits out through the urethra. And then, of course, the pubis symphysis, and that's simply back from your skeletal system. That's going to be a bone, remember, that you find in the coxal area or the pelvic girdle. Okay, so with this picture, this is showing a frontal view of the scrotum. Notice how they have the penis pulled upwards so that you can see the scrotum better. Now coming down, notice how you do have a testicular artery, you have a testicular vein. Those are going to be coming down in to feed the scrotum through the spermatic cord here. You also, in order to have the scrotum and the spermatic cord to come down into the scrotum and hang below the body, you're going to have this area here that's going to be called the superficial inguinal ring. Now, the superficial inguinal ring is going to have to be open because the scrotum or the testes are going to have to be able to penetrate through the external oblique muscle. And so you can see that hole there that's going to allow them to do this. And again, that's called the superficial inguinal ring. Now, during development, the testes are going to have to move down through this superficial inguinal ring and descend into the scrotum. Sometimes this doesn't happen, and they do have to go up and they have to do surgery in order to pull them down. That usually they start to drop within the first year of life. If they haven't come down between the first and second year, sometimes they will have to go in and do surgeries for that. So coming on down, you have that spermatic cord, which we've talked about, that contains not only like the vas deferens, but also will contain the blood vessels, it contains lymphatic vessels, and contains nerves. Now we're coming over that what divides that scrotum, you're going to have what's called a scrotal septum. It's going to be a line that divides the scrotum, and it comes through the middle, and so you'll have a right side and a left side, which contain the right scrotum, or sorry, the right testis and the left testis. And then looking down further, you're going to see a set of skeletal muscles. These are going to be called the cremaster muscles. The cremaster muscle is going to be a skeletal muscle tissue, which is going to help to raise the scrotum, along with the dartos muscle. That one's actually a smooth muscle tissue. And with these, that's going to be very important because if it's too cold outside of the body where they're hanging, then sperm will not be able to develop or to mature properly. And so that will reduce sperm production. And so they are going to have to be able to lift them up closer to the body to warm the body up or to warm the testis up in order to produce sperm. Now, if it's hot, then they will relax and release the testes and try to get them far away from the body in order to keep it cool, because the same thing with being too hot, the temperature can also, or being too cold, the temperature can also be too hot and it could hinder sperm production. Now, going around it, you're going to have a skin It's going to be a regular skin tissue, so that's going to be stratified squamous epithelium, just like the tissue that you have on your arms and legs and all over your body. Next, it's going to show that dartos muscle that's coming in, and so you see the muscles through there. And then you have a superficial scrotal fascia. That's going to be a separation in between the two sets of muscle. And then underneath that, you will have that cremaster muscle. That's going to be surrounding both the testis and that spermatic cord. So with this view, it's showing where they have removed the muscle and the skin, so you could see inside of that spermatic cord. And so you see the genetiform femoral nerve, which is going to be the nerve that travels down the scrotum, down the spermatic cord. You see your differential arteries, the ductus deferens. You see the different testicular arteries that are going down there. This one also shows the epididymis quite well, and it shows the scrotal cavity. So that testis is going to actually sit inside of the scrotal cavity, and of course it is going to be covered in layers, and so it's going to have a visceral layer, which is called the tunica vaginalis, and then it has a parietal layer of the tunica vaginalis. It's going to be on the outer portion. Now this here is a picture looking at what a cadaver would look like. So they actually took and they did a sagittal cut, so you can look inside, and so it shows you what each one of these structures actually looks like. So the primary sex organs of the male reproductive system are going to be the gonads, or the testes. They are going to produce sperm and hormones like testosterone. So with the testis structure, it's going to be ovoid in shape, and it's located, like we have been talking about and looking at, in the scrotum, and it's going to contain about 250 lobules separated by connective tissue. Now each lobule is going to hold 1 to 3 highly coiled seminiferous tubules. With these seminiferous tubules, they are going to be lined with an epithelium that is going to give rise to these sperm cells, and these we were discussing were your spermatogonia. Also here, you're going to find some interstitial cells that are going to lie between the seminiferous tubules. These are going to be the cells that are responsible for producing testosterone. So know that one. The interstitial cells produce testosterone. Then you're going to have channels that are going to lead from the seminiferous tubules and carry the sperm to the epididymis and the vas deferens. Alright, so what you're seeing in this view here is going to be kind of a side view. So the first one up here, this is going to be kind of a superficial cut, so you can look at it and you can see all the different tubules and how they lead up to the epididymis here, and then eventually the vas deferens, which is here. Now if you look at all of these different tubules, each testis is going to have about 2,133 feet of seminiferous tubules. So that's going to be all the tubules that are going to be through this area here. Now they took a plain section, so they took one of these tubes and went over to this picture here, and if you've noticed, it is going to be surrounded. Of course, you have those interstitial cells there that we talked about. Those are going to be the ones that are responsible for making testosterone under the right conditions. Then separating it, you're going to have this basement membrane that's going around the tubule, and then you'll have what's called germinal epithelial cells. And so this is going to be the epithelial cells, or the tissues of the tubules. And so inside of these seminiferous tubules, these germinal epithelial cells are going to go through meiosis, and as they do this, notice how they're pushing away, and you get layer after layer. And so as they go through meiosis and they divide themselves and they get smaller, eventually they become sperm cells. And so that makes it towards the center of that tube. Now remember, the opening of a tube is called a lumen. And so as they're being pushed away and going through meiosis, they're going and changing into, they're going through spermatogenesis and changing into actual sperm. And so then those sperm are going to be in the lumen, and from the lumen, they're going to be carried up to the epididymis, remember, which is going to be this section here, where they are going to go to mature. So in this view, it's going to be a transverse cut, so you can look down and see a different view of everything that's going on. Of course, you are looking, you've seen your skin, which remember is going to be a stratified squamous epithelium like the rest of the skin on your body. We have looked at that dartos muscle, which is going to be that first layer of muscle underneath the epithelium. We've talked about the superficial scrotal fascia, and then underneath that, your next set of skeletal muscle, which is going to be that cremaster muscle. We've talked about the tunica vaginalis, so you had the parietal, which is the one on the outer portion, and you had the visceral, which is going to be the half on the inner portion that's going to be closest to the actual testes. Now going into there, you have another connective tissue that goes around called the tunica albuginea, and then you have that scrotal cavity, which you're going to find between those two areas of that tunica vaginalis and the tunica albuginea. So with that inside, you're going to find the scrotum. Now, one thing I forgot to mention in the last picture is that these seminiferous tubules are going to be contained in sections which are going to be called lobules. And so in each lobule, you'll find a series of twisted, coiled seminiferous tubules. And remember, that's where sperm production is taking place. Now from there, we're going to move on over, and we find the raphe of the scrotum. And so that's going to be that center section that divides it, or the septum. Coming over, when all of the sperm have been produced, they come through the tubules, seminiferous tubules. Next, they're going to enter what's called the straight tubule, which comes straight up and then goes into what's known as the ready testes. And so that'll be this section here. From the ready testes, it's then going to exit out through the efferent ductile, which is going to be another straight section there. So that's over here. And it's going to enter into the epididymis. Once it enters into the epididymis, that's where it is going to mature until it's ready for ejaculation. Once it's ready for ejaculation, it's going to exit through the vas deferens or ductus deferens, which we see right here. This picture is going to be another view just to show you everything that's going on. And so starting with the top, of course, we have our spermatic cord. That spermatic cord contains, remember, your blood vessels, your nerves. It's going to have your lymphatic vessels in there. It's surrounded by muscle and surrounded by tissue that's going to come down and hold the testes. Let's start towards, let's see. Each lobule, remember, is going to contain your set of seminiferous tubules. Now, the lobules will be separated with what's known as a septum in between each, so you can see that septum there. From the lobule, it will then, those seminiferous tubules will then lead into what's called that straight tubule, so that's that straight section there. Then they go into what's known as the ready testes, and that's there. And then from the ready testes, it is going to make its way up through the straight tubule into this epididymis. And so this whole section through here is going to be the epididymis. Now you have what's called the head of the epididymis, which is going to be towards the top portion near that spermatic cord. And then you're going to have the tail of the epididymis hanging down lower towards the bottom of the scrotum. Once the sperm have matured there and they're ready for ejaculation, then they'll head in to the vas deferens, which you see here, and that's going to be this tube that's going to travel up out through the spermatic cord and make its way to the outer portion of the body as it's mixing in with the different fluids from the different glands it passes. And so this here is looking at the testes of a cadaver, and so it shows you, of course, the body of that epididymis. It's got the head, it shows the tail, it shows the testes and the spermatic cord coming down, and the different layers that are going to surround it. And then you have, of course, the sagittal section, which looks inside, which actually shows the seminiferous tubules and the reed testes. Now, male internal accessory organs. First, you're going to have that epididymis. Each epididymis is going to be a tightly coiled tube lying adjacent to the testis, and it's going to lead from the testis to the vas deferens. This is your site for sperm maturation. Now remember, sperm are going to be made inside of the seminiferous tubules inside of the testicle. Then they go to the epididymis where they're going to mature. Once they mature, then they're ready to be released. So each epididymis, if you were to stretch it out, it's going to be about 23 feet long. Now once it leaves the epididymis, it goes into the ductus deferens, or could be referred to as the vas deferens, depending on what book you're looking at or what text, what paper. Now, the ductus deferens is going to be a muscular tube that's going to be about 45 centimeters in length. That's going to lead from the epididymis up to the body cavity to the ejaculatory duct, and that's going to be where it unites and empties its contents into the urethra. And so this picture here simply shows you the different tubes. Now, if you go in and you were going to get a vasectomy, what they're going to do is they're going to cut into the scrotal skin. And of course, this is usually an outpatient procedure. You come into the doctor's office. They're able to do this under local anesthetics and anesthesia. So they'll go in, they cut the scrotum at the top portion of that vas deferens as it's coming out of the scrotum. They tie it off. Sometimes they'll clamp it off, and then they usually cauterize it. So they'll take a cauterizing or a gun, and they will heat it, and they'll burn those tubes so that they don't come back together. Now, the body's an amazing thing. It's able to heal itself very well. So even though they do these procedures, they clamp it off and they cauterize it, sometimes it still can grow back together. So they do have you, after several months, they will have you bring in a sperm or a sample of semen, and they will check it to see if there's any live sperm in there. If there is, then that means they have to go in and they will have to do this procedure again. Now, seminal vesicles. These are going to be a sac-like structure that's attached to the vas deferens near the base of the urinary bladder. These are going to secrete an alkaline fluid containing fructose. That fructose is going to be very important because it's going to nourish the sperm. It also has prostaglandins, and that's going to cause muscular contractions in the female tract. And what that does is when it reacts with the muscles in the female tract, reproductive tract, it's going to help them bring the sperm or propel the sperm towards the egg. And so that's going to contain also a lot of clotting proteins. That's going to help the semen clot in the vagina. So that's going to be very important as well. Next, it's going to reach the prostate gland. The prostate gland is going to be a golf ball sized structure that surrounds the urethra at the base of the urinary bladder. It's kind of shaped like a donut, so it goes around that urethra. It's going to be important because it's going to secrete a fluid that's going to be made of citric acid. That, in turn, is going to be used by the sperm to make ATP. Remember, ATP is going to be your very important energy molecule, and that's going to help to give sperm enough energy in order to make it to the egg. It's also going to have proteolytic enzymes. That's going to help to digest mucus and the clotted semen. And it's going to have the seminal plasmin. That's a protein with an antibiotic property, which is going to kill bacteria that could also help to reduce urinary tract infections. So looking here, you will see how that ductus deferens, or the vas, my drawing tool messed up. Let me give it a minute to kick in. All right. So the ductus deferens here, that's coming down. Notice how the seminal gland here is going to come in. It's going to release fluids in. You come into what's called the ampulla of the ductus deferens or vas deferens. You get an excretory gland of that seminal gland, and then the ejaculation duct, which are all coming in together here. You've got your prostate, which you notice is coming around that urethra there. And then once it comes from the vas deferens, it's going to enter into what's known as the urethra. And that first section is referred to as the prostatic urethra because it's going through the prostate. Next, you come down and you see you have, of course, those bulbourethral glands, and you'll see how they also enter into the fluid as well. Now, lots of men often, as they get older, will have problems with the prostate. As it can enlarge, it could mess with the ability to relieve themselves of urine because it does go around the urethra. And so you can see, just a minute. Okay, so we've got our urinary bladder here. You have the urethra coming through. And so if the prostate gland starts to enlarge, which it does in a lot of men, then it could squeeze on that urethra and make it harder for them to use the restroom. And so they actually will have a lot of stopping and starting as they're using the restroom. Also, it's important that they check it because it could be cancerous. Lots of men, as they get older, 60s, 70s, 80s, will get prostate cancer. And so in order to check this to see if it's enlarged or to see if maybe you need a biopsy, they will go in through the anus and through the rectal area, and the doctor will feel to see if it feels like it's enlarged or not. And so that's what this picture is showing here. Now with those bulbourethral glands, we've already talked about how they help to produce mucus, but it's going to be a pea-sized structure. It's located inferior to the prostate, so that means it's going to be below the prostate, and it secretes mucus to lubricate the tip of the penis and the urethra during sexual arousal. It's also going to secrete an alkaline fluid that's going to help to neutralize the acids in the urethra. Semen is going to be a combination of sperm cells. There could be anywhere from 50 to 150 million per milliliter, and the secretions of the seminal vesicles, the prostate gland, and the bulbourethral glands. The pH of semen is going to be around 7.2 to 7.7, so it's fairly neutral and going slightly towards a very weak base, but mostly neutral. The average volume per ejaculate is going to be anywhere from 2.5 to 5 milliliters. Male external reproductive organs are going to be the scrotum. Of course, the scrotum is a pouch of skin which is going to cover the testes. The penis, which is going to be the cylindrical organ that's made up of specialized erectile tissue. We talked about that being the corpus cavernosum and the corpus spongiosum. And then it's going to be designed to convey both urine and semen to the outside. The corpus spongiosum is enlarged at the distal end from the glans penis. So remember I told you those were like hollowed cavities that are going to fill up with blood, and that's going to cause the erection. So looking here at this picture, you can see that here you're going to have that urethra coming out. You've got the bulb of the penis. That's the start of the penis there. You have it coming in. You've got that corpus spongiosum in that area there that's going to be in red. You have the corpus cavernosa, which is going to be in the purple areas through here. Of course, the length of the penis is going to be referred to as the body of the penis. You have the neck of glands there. You have what's called the glans penis, and then the external urethral orifice. That's where the ejaculate comes out and also the urine comes out. This is another view that is showing you how it can come from the testes up, and it enters in through into the urethra. So get my pencil. So you've got your vas deferens coming in from each side, or ductus deferens. It's going to come in behind the urinary bladder, so you can kind of see through the bladder here. It's going to come in behind the urinary bladder. It's going to come in to the opening of the ejaculatory duct right here. And remember, once it enters that area there where the prostate is, it then becomes what's known as the prostatic urethra. From there, it comes down and you have what's called the membranosus urethra. It's going to pass the bulbourethral glands. It's going to come down further. It passes the bulb of the penis. Then it comes into the bulbourethral gland that you see here. And it's going to exit out through the spongy urethra, through the urethral orifice. Now this is going to be a sectional view through the penis. It's going to show you the dorsal view, so it shows you the arteries, it shows you the veins, and it shows you the nerves. It also shows you the stratified squamous epithelium that's going around the outside. It's going to show you the dartos muscle. It's going to show you that spongy, So it shows you the different layers going around the outside, shows you arteries. Now this one is going to show you the collagenous sheath that goes around. And then in the inner portion, you have that corpora cavernosa. And so that's going to be that hollowed out tissue. You can see all the different holes there. That's what's going to fill with blood. And so you have these deep arteries that are going to be found inside there. They're going to release that blood to fill up that tissue to help cause the erection. In front of it, more anterior to that, you're going to see that spongy urethra coming through this area, and then you have your corpus spongiosum, and you notice that has a lot of holes in there as well that's going to fill with blood and help with that erection. And so with this picture, it is simply showing you the artist view versus that of a cadaver. So you see that transverse section. Here's another view as it's going down, and so you see it's coming in from behind that urinary bladder. You've got your internal urethral orifice. It comes through the prostate where it becomes the prostatic urethra. Didn't wait again. So it becomes that prostatic urethra there. And so it's going to put in the prostate fluid. Then you come through that bulbourethral gland, which sometimes is, in some texts is referred to as the Cowper's gland. And so that is going to enter in through this area here, past the bulb of the penis, and then it's going to come into what's known as the spongy urethra. And then you can see the different cavernosum layers and spongiosum layers that are going to be around it that are going to fill with blood and cause the erection. Now, a sperm cell has a head that's going to contain a haploid nucleus. Remember, a haploid from biology means half the genetic information. So in a regular human cell, you're going to have 46 chromosomes. So if it's a haploid cell, it's going to have half of that. So it's going to have 23 chromosomes. A regular cell, remember, is diploid. And so with this haploid nucleus, it's also going to contain a midpiece that contains mitochondria. Remember, it's going to take a lot of energy to get that sperm cell up the vaginal canal, through the uterus, and into the actual uterine tubes. And so it needs mitochondria and lots of ATP. Also, it's going to have a tail. That's going to be a flagellum, and that's going to help to get it to the area where the egg is. At the tip of the head is going to be what's referred to as an acrosome. That's going to be a bag of digestive enzymes that's going to help to erode the tissue surrounding the female egg. Now this is going to be your diagram or your picture that shows you. So you see the acrosome that's going around the nucleus. Those together make up the head. Then you have your midpiece, which is going to contain your mitochondria, where your ATP or your energy is going to be. And that's going to control the tail or activate the tail, which is going to actually move the sperm. Spermatogenesis in the male embryo. The spermatogenic cells are going to be undifferentiated and called spermatogonia. Each one of them will contain 46 chromosomes, just like a somatic cell. Now, during spermatogenesis, that's the process of making sperm, those spermatogonia are going to enlarge and become primary spermatocytes. Primary spermatocytes undergo cell division by meiosis, and they're going to form those haploid secondary spermatocytes with only 23 chromosomes now. Secondary spermatocytes will then divide again to form spermatotids, each of which matures into a mature sperm cell. And remember, they go, once they're spermatotids, then they're going to go to the epididymis in order to mature. And so here's going to be another transverse cut through that seminiferous tubule. And of course, you can see the cells on the outside. So you see your dividing spermatocytes. You see them turn into spermatotids, and then they will become sperm, which is going to be released into the lumen and make its way to the epididymis. Okay, so with this view, you're going to see, let me get my pencil, running along the walls here are going to be your spermatogonia. These are going to be your stem cells they're going to end up turning into sperm cells. And so as they go through meiosis, they're going to push further and further away, and they divide into spermatocytes and eventually become the sperm that you see. They get pushed towards the lumen, and then they're going to get sent to the epididymis. Now also here, you're going to see that you have these interstitial endocrine cells. Under the right circumstances, under right hormonal control, these, remember, are going to be your cells that are going to produce testosterone. And another thing you might notice here are going to be your nurse cells. Now, these nurse cells can also be referred to as Sertoli cells. These are going to be important because they play a crucial role in spermatogenesis, which remembers your process of sperm production. So they're going to provide a nurturing environment. They provide structural support, so these germ cells are able to develop, basically. So one thing that they do is they're going to provide those developing sperms some essential nutrients and growth factors, and that's going to ensure their proper development and maturation. They're also going to form a blood-testis barrier, and so this barrier is going to protect the developing germ cells from the immune system and ensure a stable environment for spermatogenesis to occur. And then, of course, it can produce some hormones. So these Sertoli cells can secrete various hormones, including androgen binding proteins, which are going to be ABP, or inhibin B. And this is going to help to regulate spermatogenesis and other testicular functions. As we look at these closer, they also can, work with phagocytosis, which means they can engulf and eliminate any type of cell or cellular debris that they could come across in those seminiferous tubules, to anything that basically needs to be taken out of that area. And basically they also give structural support or framework within that seminiferous tubule. Now here's going to be a closer view looking at it. And so with this, right, so you're going to see the structural layer on the outside. On the inside, you're going to see these spermatogonia. These are going to undergo meiosis. So they're starting out in that area with 46 chromosomes. And so going in, you also see that blood testis barrier that I just told you about that's going to wrap around these stem cells. So after they go through meiosis, then they get pushed further down. They become primary spermatocytes, which are preparing for that meiosis 1. Then they go into secondary spermatocytes, and then as they continue to divide, they become spermatids, and that's the beginning of spermatogenesis. Eventually, these spermatids do develop into what looks like sperm, and they'll move through the lumen towards the epididymis. Also, what you see in here, you're going to see, those nurse cells or Sertoli cells right here. Remember, those are going to be the ones that are there to help nurture. They provide nutrition, they provide support, they help with that blood-testis barrier, and they perform phagocytosis if needed. Here's another view that is just showing you the development of the sperm. And so you have your spermatogonia with your 46 chromosomes at the bottom. Turns into a primary spermatocyte, still has 46 chromosomes. Then it starts to divide again, and then it comes down to 23 chromosomes as a secondary spermatocyte. Becomes a spermatotid. Notice that it is starting to develop a tail. It's got an acrosome and a head. And then becomes a sperm cell with 23 chromosomes as it makes its way and gets pushed out into the lumen. Here's simply another view of what's going on inside of the cell. So you got your primary spermatocyte with 46 chromosomes. It goes through its first meiotic division, becomes 2 secondary spermatocytes. With the top one, you're going to develop, and let's look across it. That secondary spermatocyte undergoes a second meiotic division, and then it creates spermatids. From there, the sperm cells will develop. This is what it actually looks like if you were to look at it underneath a microscope and look at what's going on. So you've got your seminiferous tubule up top. You've got those interstitial cells, which are producing testosterone that are surrounding the seminiferous tubules. And you can see the spermatogonia and then towards the lumen, you'll see the sperm cells. Now with the acrosome, we said that that's going to be found covering the nucleus, so that's part of the head. Those enzymes are going to help with penetration. Now it is very important that it does go through the acids in the vaginal canal because that starts to wear away some at that acrosome, and it kind of has a little cap on it if you look at it. And once it wears away at that, that makes it and prepares it so it's able to release those enzymes and to basically digest the outer portion of the egg so it can make its way in. The neck's going to contain centrioles that form microtubules that make up the rest of the tail. You have a middle piece which contains mitochondria. It's responsible for making ATP, that's your energy for locomotion of the sperm. And then you have the principal piece and end piece. Those are going to make up the tails, which are going to be used for movement